I never knew until today, Emily Harper whispered under her breath, her eyes locked on the small figure in the toy aisle as she clutched Noah's tiny hand. The bright colors of the store blurred around her, her focus narrowing to the child who was holding onto her coat and looking up with wide, innocent eyes. Noah, just shy of 6 years old, had been chattering about a new puzzle set when a stranger's gaze landed on them from across the aisle. Emily didn't notice at first, too busy scanning the shelves for the brand of building blocks Noah had been asking for, a set she could barely afford on her weekly budget. But then she felt it, a presence so commanding that it made her stomach tighten, an awareness that someone was studying them with an intensity she hadn't encountered in years. Lucas Bennett, the CEO of Bennett Industries, paused mid-step, his hand hovering near a display of board games as his grey-blue eyes settled on the little boy beside Emily. Something about Noah's features, the curve of his jawline, the tilt of his head, the very shape of his eyes, froze Lucas in place. His mind reeled, memories of past conversations, of time spent with Emily before the breakup, flashed through him in a way that was almost tangible. Emily felt a prickle at the back of her neck, a sudden awareness that someone was observing her, but she forced herself to smile down at Noah, smoothing his messy brown hair. "Look, sweetie," she said softly, holding up a box of building blocks, "these are perfect for you." Noah's attention briefly shifted, but he didn't take his eyes off the man whose presence seemed both familiar and impossible. Lucas's chest tightened, an uncharacteristic uncertainty settling over him as he realized that the resemblance between him and the boy could not be a coincidence. His carefully curated composure faltered just enough that a hint of vulnerability crept into his usually unshakable demeanor. Emily caught the slightest change in the atmosphere but dismissed it, attributing it to the bustling noise of the store. She bent down to adjust Noah's backpack strap, and in that instant, Lucas's gaze lingered on the small hand clutching hers, the same hand that bore an uncanny similarity to the one he remembered holding years ago. Emily straightened, lifting Noah onto a low display shelf so he could reach the higher shelves, all the while unaware that Lucas was stepping closer, careful not to startle her, yet unable to resist the pull of curiosity. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floors, amplifying the tension that had settled into a quiet hum between them. Lucas's mind raced with questions he wasn't ready to voice aloud. Emily's heart beat steadily, unaware that the world she had built to protect herself and her son was on the brink of colliding with someone from her past who might change everything. She glanced at Noah, whose laughter rang like a bell, lightening the moment, but it was fleeting against the weight of the unspoken. Lucas inhaled deeply, steadying himself as he took another step closer, the leather of his jacket creaking softly, and Emily felt a subtle shift in the air, a tiny, inexplicable tension that made her pulse quicken. "Mom." Noah's voice pulled her attention back, and she knelt to adjust his coat, smiling down at him with warmth, the kind that masked worry and fear alike. Lucas watched from a short distance, torn between the propriety of distance and the insistent tug of recognition that refused to let him look away. His hand twitched near the edge of a shopping cart, and he took another step, almost imperceptibly, closing the gap, his eyes never leaving Noah's face. Emily picked up the puzzle box, checking the price tag with a resigned sigh, thinking about the few dollars left in her wallet and the week ahead, oblivious to the fact that a man who once held her heart in his hands was quietly measuring every detail of her life, silently deciding whether to speak, whether to intervene, or whether to simply watch as fate unfolded in the fluorescent-lit aisle. Emily adjusted Noah's backpack, securing the straps tightly while keeping a gentle hand on his shoulder, guiding him down the crowded aisle toward the checkout. The sound of carts rolling and children laughing filled the store, but her focus remained on the small figure in front of her and the man whose eyes had lingered on her son with an intensity she could not yet place. Lucas walked slowly, careful not to draw attention to himself, his gaze fixed on Noah, analyzing every feature, every movement, as if searching for confirmation of what his heart already suspected. Emily reached for a box of colored pencils that Noah had requested, frowning at the price tag and silently calculating whether she could stretch her budget this week to cover it. Noah tugged lightly at her hand, pointing to a puzzle set on a higher shelf, and Emily lifted him onto her hip so he could reach it, glancing around at the bustling store, unaware that Lucas had taken another step closer, his presence almost imperceptible yet undeniably strong. She smiled at Noah, ruffling his dark brown hair and reassuring him that they would get everything on the list, while Lucas's mind raced, connecting memories of Emily, of a shared past, to the undeniable resemblance between him and the little boy. The resemblance went beyond the surface. There was an expression, a tilt of the head, a spark of curiosity in Noah's eyes that mirrored his own, and it struck Lucas like a revelation he had been waiting years to witness. Emily maneuvered the shopping cart down the aisle, placing items carefully while checking her phone for a budget app, noting the dwindling balance and reminding herself that she had to stretch every dollar, completely unaware that Lucas had observed the way she handled the practicalities of motherhood with a mix of precision and tenderness, a combination that had captivated him years ago. As they approached the checkout, Noah's excitement for a small toy car caused him to fidget and almost knock over a display of small items, and Emily laughed softly, scolding him gently, bending to pick up the scattered pieces. Lucas's hand twitched, wanting to step in, but he restrained himself, realizing that this was her world, her routine, and yet he could not stop the pull that drew him into it. Emily swiped her debit card with a quiet sigh, counting coins and dollars to make sure she had enough for the total, and Lucas noticed the delicate way she shielded Noah from the financial worry, protecting him from anxiety she bore silently. The line moved slowly, and Lucas's presence grew heavier in the background, an unspoken tension as he considered whether to approach, how to speak, how to bridge the gap between what was past and what was suddenly undeniable. Emily loaded the groceries into the cart, unaware of the internal struggle taking place mere feet away, and as she adjusted Noah's coat once more, he looked up at her with a grin, blissfully innocent, and Lucas found himself studying the curve of his son's smile, the flicker of recognition that he could not yet name, and the way Emily's eyes softened as she looked down at Noah, a combination of love and fatigue that resonated deep within him. The checkout beeped and scanned each item, a mundane rhythm that contrasted sharply with the storm of realization building in Lucas, and as Emily pushed the cart toward the exit, Lucas stepped forward, clearing his throat softly, careful not to startle them, and spoke in a measured voice, "Excuse me, Emily." Her head turned, heart skipping a beat at the familiarity of the voice, and she met Lucas's gaze, feeling a wave of old memories crash over her as she searched for composure, knowing that something fundamental had shifted in an instant, that the life she had been maintaining alone was suddenly under the watchful eye of someone from her past, and she could not yet predict whether that shift would bring relief, confrontation, or a new beginning. Lucas cleared his throat once more, drawing Emily's attention fully as she shifted Noah slightly behind her, protective yet curious about the intensity in his gaze. The bustling sounds of the store seemed to fade as the world contracted around the three of them, the fluorescent lighting casting sharp lines across Lucas's face, highlighting a mixture of recognition, hesitation, and something unspoken that Emily could not yet place. She swallowed, trying to maintain a calm exterior, yet the rapid beating of her heart betrayed her awareness that this was a pivotal moment, one that could unravel years of carefully maintained distance and independence. Lucas's eyes softened slightly as he took a careful step closer, his voice measured, "I do not want to startle you, but I believe there is something important we need to discuss." Emily tightened her grip on Noah's hand, sensing the seriousness in his tone, and nodded, prompting him to continue. Lucas's gaze flicked between her and Noah, lingering on the small features of the boy that mirrored his own, and a quiet ache of disbelief passed through him. "That boy," he said, his voice low yet clear, "he carries more than just resemblance. He carries pieces of a past I thought had long ended." Emily's brow furrowed slightly, suspicion mixing with a dawning realization that Lucas was aware of something she had kept close to her chest. She shifted Noah gently, crouching to his level, speaking softly to reassure him while her mind raced, calculating the safest way to navigate the conversation that was inevitable. Lucas took another deliberate step, careful not to invade their space, but his presence pressed against the tension Emily carried. She could feel the weight of his observation, the way his eyes scanned every movement Noah made, and it stirred an unexpected flurry of protective instincts in her. "I want to understand," Lucas continued, his voice calm yet imbued with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. "I need to know if my instincts are correct, and I hope you will allow me to ask the questions I must." Emily drew a steadying breath, her mind flicking through possibilities and consequences, weighing honesty against caution, and finally nodded slightly, signaling that he could speak. Lucas's hands remained relaxed at his sides, but his posture was deliberate, conveying both patience and the unspoken power he wielded in his life outside this aisle. He looked down at Noah, who was unaware of the gravity of the moment, engrossed in examining a small puzzle box with quiet fascination, and a surge of emotion tightened Lucas's chest, a mixture of awe and incredulity that this child, so vividly resembling him, was here before him, tangible and undeniable. Emily watched the interplay of expressions, the subtle shifts in Lucas's demeanor as he processed the reality in front of him, and despite her careful composure, a flicker of vulnerability crossed her features, betraying her deep awareness that the situation had escalated beyond ordinary encounters. The store's background noise resumed gradually, but the tension remained, thick and palpable, an invisible thread connecting their shared history and the present revelation. Lucas inhaled slowly, steadying himself, and took one final step closer, close enough that his presence could no longer be ignored, his voice dropping just enough to carry the weight of sincerity. "Emily, I believe that boy might be mine, and I need you to help me understand, because everything else does not matter if this is true." Emily's lips parted, uncertainty and the flicker of recognition mingling in her eyes as she met his gaze, realizing that the conversation she had long avoided was now unavoidable, that Noah's laughter and innocence had drawn a man from her past into the immediate reality of her present, and that what followed could alter the fragile equilibrium she had maintained for years. She adjusted Noah's backpack one last time, smoothing the fabric and lifting his chin gently so that he looked at her, drawing strength from his trust and innocence, while Lucas's expression softened further, conveying an unspoken promise that whatever came next, he would proceed with care, awareness, and the unyielding attention of a father newly awakened to the presence of his child. Emily drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of Lucas's words settle into her chest like an unexpected winter chill, and she adjusted Noah on her hip, letting his small hand slide into hers for comfort while her mind raced through the possibilities that had led to this moment. The store around them continued its rhythm of movement, carts rolling, cash registers chiming, and children laughing, yet it all seemed distant compared to the intensity of the exchange between her and Lucas. He took another careful step forward, his posture conveying both patience and determination, and Emily could not ignore the mixture of familiarity and authority in his presence, the way his gaze never wavered from her son, taking in every expression, every subtle motion as if memorizing the smallest details. She forced a calm, steadying smile, aware of how much she had guarded her life and Noah from disruptions, from past memories, from people who had come and gone, and now here stood someone from her past whose mere presence demanded answers she had long postponed. "Emily," Lucas said softly, his voice carrying across the aisle in a way that was impossible to ignore, "I need you to understand that I am not here to judge or to complicate your life, but I cannot ignore the resemblance, and I need to know if my instincts are correct." Emily tightened her hold on Noah's hand, her pulse quickening as she glanced down at her son's bright, curious eyes, realizing that in those moments of innocence there lay a connection neither of them could deny, and the thought that Lucas might be his father brought a mixture of apprehension and hope that she had not allowed herself to feel for years. Lucas's expression softened further, a mixture of awe and caution, and he lowered his voice just enough to carry the sincerity and gravity of the moment without startling Noah. "I know this is sudden, and I know it is complicated, but I need your help to understand." Emily's mind whirled with memories of their past, the breakup, the independence she had fought to maintain, and yet a flicker of something long dormant stirred within her, a sense of shared responsibility and unspoken connection that now could not be denied. She felt Noah shift slightly against her, tugging at her sleeve, and she knelt down, looking into his eyes, masking the turmoil she felt while speaking to Lucas. "You need to understand that I have been doing everything I can to protect him, to make sure he is safe and happy, and I will not let anything change that without reason." Lucas nodded, taking in every word, every nuance, his gaze moving from Emily to Noah and back, registering the fierce protectiveness, the exhaustion, and the love that radiated from her, and he knew that whatever steps he took next would have to be careful, deliberate, and thoughtful. Emily continued, her voice steady but with an undertone of tension. "If there is something you need to say, you must say it now, because I cannot pretend that everything is ordinary when I see you here." Lucas inhaled deeply, a slow, measured breath, and extended a hand in a gesture that was both tentative and respectful. "Then let us begin with honesty, Emily. I want to know everything about him, about us, and about the life you have built, because I cannot turn away from this any longer." Emily looked down at Noah once more, feeling the weight of the choice she had to make, and then back at Lucas, reading the sincerity in his face, the vulnerability beneath the composed exterior of a man who had always carried authority and control, and she realized that this moment could be the start of understanding, of clarity, and perhaps the cautious first step toward a future neither of them had dared to imagine until now. Lucas took a careful step closer, keeping his voice steady as he addressed Emily. "I need to see him, to know for myself that everything I am sensing is true." Emily's grip on Noah tightened slightly, a mixture of protectiveness and uncertainty flickering across her face, but she nodded slowly, realizing that avoidance would not erase the truth that now stood before her. She lifted Noah slightly, guiding him forward while her heart pounded in a rhythm that mirrored the tension building in Lucas's chest, the quiet hum of the store fading into the background as the gravity of the moment enveloped them. Lucas extended a hand toward Noah, not in intrusion but in gesture, allowing the boy to choose, and Noah's small hand hesitated before brushing against Lucas's in a tentative connection that made Lucas's chest tighten with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Emily watched carefully, her mind balancing caution with the instinct to observe how this interaction would unfold, and she saw the flicker of recognition cross Lucas's face as he noted the identical curve of Noah's smile and the same expressive eyes that mirrored his own. He knelt slightly to be at Noah's level, speaking softly. "Hi, I am Lucas. I think I may know you more than you realize." Noah blinked, uncertain but intrigued, and Emily's heart softened, seeing the way her son responded with a mix of curiosity and innocence, the tension easing slightly in a way that felt fragile but significant. Lucas spoke gently to Noah, asking about his favorite games and the things he liked to do, and the boy responded with shy enthusiasm, revealing glimpses of personality that struck Lucas as deeply familiar, as though pieces of himself had been carried forward in Noah's laughter and gestures. Emily stood a few steps back, silently observing, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension as the bond slowly started to form in the small gestures, in the shared smiles, and the careful, unspoken understanding developing between Lucas and her son. The store's activity resumed fully around them, the clinking of the checkout and the chatter of other shoppers creating a mundane contrast to the intimate, delicate connection being established in the midst of it all. Lucas straightened slightly, turning his gaze to Emily, his eyes conveying respect and a quiet intensity. "I understand this is sudden, and I do not wish to overstep, but I need to know how I can support both of you, if you will let me." Emily took a slow breath, recognizing the sincerity in his voice, and nodded carefully, feeling the weight of the moment settle into a fragile sense of possibility. She adjusted Noah's backpack again, ensuring it was secure while he glanced up at Lucas with a tentative smile, and Lucas's expression softened further, the lines of tension in his face easing as he realized that trust, even in small increments, was beginning to take root. They moved together toward the checkout, the groceries in the cart a small reminder of the practical world surrounding them, yet the emotional landscape had shifted profoundly, the air between them charged with the potential for understanding, for dialogue, and for a cautious beginning that acknowledged both the past and the uncertain steps ahead. Emily's mind whirred with thoughts of how to navigate this new reality while protecting her son, and Lucas remained observant, patient, and grounded, ready to bridge the gap that years of separation had created, knowing that every word, every gesture, and every moment of care would matter as they began to navigate the delicate path that lay before them. Emily maneuvered the cart toward the exit, her mind spinning with thoughts of what Lucas had just asked and the realization that their encounter had shifted the dynamic of her carefully controlled world. Noah tugged at her hand again, his small fingers weaving through hers as he pointed at a display of colorful balloons near the front of the store, his excitement a stark contrast to the seriousness of the conversation that had just taken place. Lucas walked beside them, maintaining a respectful distance while keeping a vigilant eye on both Emily and Noah, noting the natural ease with which Emily managed the small boy, the way her patience never faltered even when he became momentarily distracted by a bright toy or a candy display. She adjusted Noah's coat collar, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and Lucas could not help but notice the similarity in gestures, the care and attentiveness that mirrored his own tendencies when he was with family, the realization of which sent an unexpected pang of emotion through him. Emily glanced at Lucas, the weight of uncertainty and caution evident in her eyes, yet there was also a flicker of acknowledgement, a recognition that this man had once been integral to a part of her life she had long tried to set aside. As they reached the automatic doors, the chill of the November air swept in, brushing against Emily's cheeks and carrying with it the faint scent of fallen leaves and winter frost, and she wrapped Noah's scarf snugly around his neck while keeping her focus forward, resisting the urge to question what would come next. Lucas exhaled slowly, grounding himself, his mind mapping out how he would navigate the delicate balance of approaching her without overstepping boundaries, aware that trust had to be earned and that any misstep could reinforce walls she had built for years. Emily's thoughts raced as she loaded the groceries into her car, the familiar act of handling the weekly necessities grounding her even as her attention drifted to the intensity of Lucas's presence, the sharp awareness that his curiosity was tempered by genuine care and that he had not yet crossed a line she could not handle. Noah clambered into the back seat, placing his small hands on the headrest and giggling as he looked at the bright sky, and Lucas followed, his eyes softening as he observed the simple joy of the boy, a reminder of innocence that had survived despite challenges. Emily slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine and watching as Lucas moved to the passenger side, his movements deliberate and calm, the weight of his expression betraying both anticipation and a careful respect for her space. The vehicle hummed quietly as they merged into traffic, the cityscape unfolding around them, and Lucas's gaze shifted between the windshield and the boy in the rearview mirror, noting every gesture, every expression, and the way Noah's presence illuminated a connection he had only just begun to understand. Emily kept her hands on the wheel, eyes forward, heart pounding as she processed the gravity of their interaction, silently acknowledging the delicate balance between caution and the flicker of possibility that Lucas represented. He spoke gently, breaking the silence without urgency. "Emily, I want to understand everything, from the beginning until now, because I cannot ignore what I see, and I hope you can trust me enough to let me." Emily exhaled, a quiet tension leaving her shoulders as she felt a tentative opening, a path toward dialogue and clarity, knowing that whatever came next would be guided by honesty, careful steps, and the unfolding reality of a past she had long carried alone. The drive through the city streets was quiet, punctuated only by the soft hum of the tires on asphalt and the occasional distant honk, yet inside the car, the tension was palpable, a silent conversation passing between Emily and Lucas through glances, gestures, and the unspoken acknowledgement of what had just unfolded. Noah leaned back in his seat, idly holding a small action figure he had found in his backpack, completely unaware of the intricate web of emotion surrounding him, his innocence casting a warm, grounding light on the moment that both comforted and unsettled Emily. She stole a brief glance at Lucas, who was keeping his eyes mostly on the road ahead but allowed his peripheral vision to monitor Noah, the intensity of his gaze softened by a quiet awe that seemed to radiate from the way he observed the boy's smallest movements. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she realized that Lucas's presence, while initially overwhelming, was not imposing, but measured, respectful, and attentive, a marked contrast to her past experiences. The light from street lamps flickered across the interior, casting shifting shadows on their faces as she maneuvered through the familiar roads toward home, and she felt the weight of the unspoken questions hovering in the air, the delicate balance between protection and openness teetering on the edge of a single decision. Lucas finally broke the silence, his voice steady but low, almost a murmur over the engine's quiet hum. "Emily, I want to understand everything about him, about the choices you made, and the life you built for him without me knowing, because I do not want to assume, and I cannot ignore what I see." Emily exhaled slowly, weighing the honesty she owed against the caution she needed to maintain, and she nodded, a subtle gesture that communicated a willingness to engage without surrendering control. Noah's laughter at the small antics of his action figure brought a brief, genuine smile to both adults, the sound threading through the tension like a fragile lifeline, and Lucas's gaze softened further as he observed the light in the boy's eyes, recognizing traits that were undeniably his own yet filtered through the love and care Emily had poured into raising him. Emily guided the car into the driveway, pausing briefly before shutting off the engine, her fingers lingering on the wheel as she gathered her thoughts, the quiet of the moment deepened by the soft rustle of leaves and the cool November air drifting in through the slightly open window. Lucas turned toward her, his expression earnest, showing no impatience, only the steady patience of someone ready to listen and to act once he understood the full picture, and Emily felt a cautious hope stir, the sense that perhaps, for the first time in years, a difficult past might find a pathway to clarity and connection. She opened her door, allowing Noah to scramble out first, his small feet pattering against the concrete as he ran toward the small patch of yard he loved, and Lucas followed, his movements deliberate, the careful attention in his eyes never leaving the boy or Emily. The three of them stood for a moment in the crisp air, the streetlights casting a gentle glow over the scene, and Emily realized that while questions remained and the path ahead was uncertain, The first step toward understanding and perhaps reconciliation had been taken, and the quiet anticipation of what could come next hung in the air, as tangible as the cool night around them. Emily unlocked the front door, the faint click echoing in the quiet evening as she stepped inside, Noah trailing closely behind, his small hand still firmly holding hers, and Lucas following a few steps behind, careful to remain respectful of the space she had maintained for so long. The warm glow from the living room lamps bathed the room in soft light, and Emily guided Noah toward the sofa, allowing him to drop his backpack and kick off his small sneakers, a contented smile spreading across his face as he reached for a set of building blocks he had been excited to play with all week. Lucas's eyes followed every movement, noting the ease and attentiveness with which Emily balanced household routines with the care of her son, the quiet efficiency and love evident in her gestures, and he felt a mixture of admiration and humility, recognizing that this daily dedication was something he had been absent for in Noah's life. Emily moved to the kitchen counter to put away the groceries, her hands methodically arranging the items while her mind raced with strategies on how to navigate the conversation that was inevitable, aware that the presence of Lucas, the man from her past who now might be her son's father, demanded honesty and careful management. Lucas stood near the edge of the living room, his posture relaxed but his attention unyielding, observing the interplay between mother and child, the way Noah's small features mirrored his own, the same expression of curiosity and wonder lighting up the boy's face, and he felt a pang of emotion, both awe and responsibility pressing on him simultaneously. Emily glanced over her shoulder, catching the intensity in Lucas's gaze, and spoke softly, "He has been through a lot, but he is happy, he is safe, and that has always been my priority." Lucas nodded slowly, his voice calm yet firm. "I understand, and I want to help, but I also need to understand everything, to know him, and to know you, so we can navigate this together, not apart." Noah, hearing their voices, looked up at both of them, his small eyes wide and innocent, and Emily felt the tug of maternal protectiveness, yet she also sensed that a careful, measured opening was forming, a path that could allow Lucas to step into their lives gradually, thoughtfully. The room filled with a quiet tension, punctuated by the soft clatter of building blocks as Noah began to construct a small tower, and Emily allowed herself a brief exhale, appreciating the calm of the evening while acknowledging the uncertainty that loomed ahead. Lucas moved slightly closer, careful not to impose, offering a gentle smile toward Emily and Noah. "If you will allow me, I would like to spend time with him, to learn about him, to be part of his life in a way that respects both of you." Emily met his gaze, seeing the sincerity and care, and she nodded, a subtle but deliberate gesture that signaled tentative trust, and in that moment, the three of them shared a quiet understanding, the beginnings of connection and the delicate formation of a new chapter in their lives, filled with potential, respect, and the unspoken promise of guidance, care, and cautious hope. As the evening deepened and the soft glow of the living room lamps reflected off the walls, Emily watched Noah carefully place the last block on top of his tower, his small face lit with pride and satisfaction, and she felt a mixture of warmth and apprehension, aware that this simple moment was layered with complexities she had long avoided. Lucas remained seated quietly on the sofa, his posture relaxed but attentive, observing the boy with a mixture of wonder and careful calculation, noting every expression, every small gesture, recognizing in them the traits that were unmistakably his own, and the sense of responsibility it awakened in him was both humbling and urgent. Emily placed the empty grocery bags on the counter, her mind still processing the tentative agreement to allow Lucas into their lives, and she adjusted a cushion on the sofa before sitting down, keeping a respectful distance while maintaining an open posture that invited dialogue without pressure. Lucas shifted slightly, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped, and he spoke softly, his voice imbued with sincerity and care. "I understand that this is a lot to ask, and I do not want to overwhelm either of you, but I hope to be part of his life, to support and guide him in ways that you feel comfortable with." Emily's eyes met his, weighing the honesty and the potential consequences of allowing him into their private world, and she nodded slowly, signaling cautious acceptance while maintaining her role as protector and guide. Noah, sensing the calm and steady presence of both adults, crawled onto Emily's lap, leaning against her shoulder, and Lucas's expression softened further as he extended a hand toward the boy, who hesitated only briefly before reaching out, allowing the connection to form without force or expectation. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken communication, a careful balance of respect, curiosity, and emerging trust, punctuated only by the faint sounds of the city outside, muffled through the windows, reminding them that the world continued beyond this fragile, significant bubble. Emily exhaled quietly, feeling a tentative relief, acknowledging that the first step had been taken, that a bridge had begun to form across years of separation, misunderstandings, and fear, and that the possibility of a shared future was now a tangible consideration rather than a distant hope. Lucas adjusted his posture slightly, glancing at Emily with a mixture of respect and intent, conveying his commitment to move carefully, deliberately, and thoughtfully, understanding that trust was not instantaneous but built incrementally through consistency and consideration. Emily gently stroked Noah's hair, feeling the softness and warmth of his presence, and in that moment she sensed the potential for healing and connection, the possibility that what had once been broken could be navigated into a form of understanding and partnership, even if tentative. The room remained quiet, filled with the subtle rhythm of shared breaths, soft movements, and the quiet presence of a child whose innocence was a stabilizing force, and Emily felt a sense of cautious hope, realizing that while challenges remained and questions were yet to be answered, the first steps toward reconciliation, trust, and the possibility of a unified family were finally unfolding in a tangible, meaningful way, guided by honesty, patience, and the gentle but unwavering presence of someone from her past who was now committed to a future that included them both.